2019, but I like to make big changes right before crazy stuff happens in the world that could impact that change, you know? Yep. All right, cool. Let's get started. A little bit past 6:30 now. Looks like we've got some people on the stream. If you need Wi-Fi, they wrote it up here as well, just in case. All right, tonight we will be talking about effective and smart image strategies for Craft CMS. First, I want to thank our sponsor for food, SoulSpace. SoulSpace is a full stack agency based out of the Bay Area, but very distributed team from Europe to Japan to East Coast to West Coast, South America, broad range of client base, all kinds of different work, but they do specialize mostly in craft, previous expression engine agency, and they created and managed two of the most popular plugins in the plugin store still today, which is Freeform, Form Management, and Calendar. Freeform is still the top grossing and will probably continue to be the top grossing paid plugin in the plugin store. I've worked for SoulSpace part-time since 2015, I think, specializing mostly in craft, but I do some expression engine work a little bit here and there. They're a great company. I would highly encourage you to use Freeform, and we'll talk about it at the end, but one of the next meetups is about form strategies with Freeform and Formy and a couple other options. Thank you also to the union crew, Avery, Ron, and Banks, who I've known since I first moved back down here in 2017, which is super funny. I had to email him right away when I saw that he hit his anniversary of 20 years, was it something like that? And I was like, dude, has it really been 20 years, man? He was like, yes, it has. The time has flown. Union has a beautiful space here, does great work specializing in travel and tourism, health and wellness, food and beverage brands. I do some work, about to start some more work with these guys. Great team, kind of a hybrid right now, some remote, some in office, but Union was very kind enough back in 2019 to let me host all of the meetups here. Decided this year just to kind of bounce around at different locations, just to spread the love a little bit. Banks completely, like within 5 minutes of me emailing and saying, hey, I'm starting these back up. He said, dude, you come here as much as you want to. So thank you to Banks and the team here. All right. Images are quite a conundrum when it comes to building websites. In 2022, the websites that we build, no matter if it's a brochureware site or something that's a little more interactive or even, you know, deeper analytic, you're still going to have tons of images on it. It's part of the nature of building a site right now. Large viewport heroes, lots of sliders, image galleries, abstract background images, you know, you name it, they're going to have it. Something's going to have an image in it. In the past decade, average web page weight has grown by 356%, which is pretty crazy, from an average of 484 kilobytes to over 2,000 kilobytes. And that's just an average. And that's probably based off of the top 200 websites based on traffic. When asked what visual elements they value on a company website, 40% of consumers said images. 39% of people will stop engaging with a website if the images won't load or take too long to load. 88% of online consumers are less likely to return to a site after a bad experience, which could be taking a long time to load because the images take too long. And building a craft schema to provide content editors the best image management experience while also balancing server resource allocation and front-end speed is challenging. So let's explore some strategies and tools that can assist with these challenges and create a great editor experience, which is important, a resilient server resource allocation assurance, and meet or exceed both user perceived site speed performance and measurable performance, which are, two different things. And I love this guy. I've been itching to get him into a slide deck. So tonight's agenda, we will touch on common challenges with image management, upload optimization, general strategies, some storage strategies. We'll talk about transforms and some effective strategies for transforming. We'll touch on responsive images on the front end. We'll detail some eager loading, which is a pretty nice thing that Yi and Craft offers. We'll go over some plugins that can help all of this in a broad range, and a quick wrap up and review. So some common challenges with image management. Clients, we love them, we hate them. They pay our bills. God help them sometimes. They will upload large, rich images to their CMS for content use. Some of them don't realize they do this, uploading raw, unformatted, unoptimized images directly from their mobile phones, or a huge stock image they just purchased. Some clients just insist on uploading a very large file size image, thinking that it's going to improve the image resolution on the website. Those large images eat needlessly away at server storage space. They slow down your front end page loads and can crash servers if they perform, if you're performing a lot of multiple transforms. I've experienced that myself. Yep, Mabry has too. Here's a nice example of one of my clients right now that still puts up 1-2 megabyte images. Do the best we can to get them to the right place. Clients will dump all their images into one storage source, no matter what type of organization you give them. They won't name their files properly. They will try different versions of an image and upload multiple versions of that image to the CMS without removing the old past versions. This can cause confusion for other editors and content managers when searching for images to reuse, and they can't find it and they'll just upload it again. And then you've got 14 versions of the same hero image. This also contributes to bloat when an editor can't find an image and also uploads the same thing. Here's another great example, Untitled Design 19, 18, and 17. Clients will use images for campaigns and then not remove the assets from the CMS after the campaign is complete and the pages are removed or redirected, and they still live on. They're zombies. This continues to bloat the server storage space, causes decision paralysis when somebody has no idea what that image is. Should I remove it? No, Bob's going to get mad at me if I take it out. He might be using it. There's no housekeeping ability at that point. Lowers the reliability and speed of asset searches in the CMS because Craft has to index all of that and keep up with an index, and it's going to keep looking. And the more that grows, the slower you're going to get to the resolution of what you're actually looking for. Here's another one of my clients' asset use, and you see, I'll mention this in a little bit, but I have a plugin installed, asset usage, where I've been trying to educate them to look, and if they see something that's marked red that's unused, delete it. You can always add it back again or just download it to your hard drive if you're unsure about it. This is just one page of one screen, and there's only 2 images in this list that's actually used in Craft at the moment on an entry. And clients will create large infographics that probably would be better suited as text on the page to begin with. They'll add abstract images to content that literally has no context at all to the content on the page, just because they think it needs an image, because they read on a blog post somewhere that there's an image that needs to be used. Here's a great example as well. You can see that. It's literally the same image. And I think there's about 14 or 15 of them here. I don't know who did that, but they're all the same one. Large file uploads, upload organization, dead assets, image overuse. Literally none of these are a client's fault. Generally, a client will adhere to best practices if we educate them and give them the proper tools and the services backing up those best practices to use. That's where our responsibility comes in as web developers, but also stewards of their content management system. We can educate a client with easy recommendations, provide them with online tools that can optimize images before upload, and then do the hard work, which is automate as much as we can for optimizations, organizations, and best practices within the CMS. All right, so probably one of the most challenging things dealing with a client is having that hard conversation with them, telling them, please don't upload anything to the CMS over 500K or something like that. I've got this PDF of this thing that needs to go on the CMS and it's 40 megabytes or something. Can we just do it this one time? Ugh. You really should set a reasonable file upload limit, both in Craft and PHP settings, to prevent anything larger than generally 1.5 megabytes to be uploaded. I would try to keep that below 1. As resolutions have increased and the popularity of full bleed hero images have gone up, you kind of got to increase that on a case by case basis, depending on what they're uploading. If a client needs to upload large PDFs or something else outside of the images on the front end, you can either temporarily increase that, let them do it, and be sure to restore the old one, or you can do the handy trick that I've been doing a little bit lately, where ask them for the file, put a like 1K PDF that you make yourself up on the CMS, and then FTP over top of it, the same file that's the actual file. That bypasses the upload limit. You reindex in Craft, and there magically your new 40 megabyte PDF is up in the CMS without the client taking advantage of that and saying, oh, wait, I've got this big image, I'm going to put it up there. And then everything blows up. Don't ever tell a client that trick. It stays in the room or on the stream. All right, there is a plugin that really, really helps as well. Resizing and doing a little bit of optimization, but really resizing. It's literally called Image Resizer. It's made by Verb. It's free. It's available for Craft 3 and Craft 4. And it allows the client to, if they're not savvy or they don't have Photoshop or some tool that they can resize things with, you can literally do it automated for them. And I encourage use of this, even if you have a very savvy client that is doing things right, because a human is going to make mistakes. And if you can have these bumpers in place that is, given a 4,000 by 2,500 pixel image and a max width height of 1024, resize it automatically as it goes up onto the CMS, automated, that's awesome. It works for every type of asset source you could have, whether it's local, Rackspace, S3, Google Cloud Storage, any of that. It offers batch resizing of stuff that's already uploaded to the CMS. Under the hood, it's ran through Craft's Q service. It won't time out. It'll batch stuff out. It's not going to crash server resources or memory or anything like that. You can also, using the plugin settings page, bulk resize all assets in a single folder or volume if you want to. Here's a good screenshot of what it looks like as that is running. Each time an image is processed, it will log feedback for the task. This is a good way to track whether it's actually getting used and gives you a good benchmark as to how much more education you may need to give to the content management team on, hey, kind of using this a little bit too much. We've got this bumper in place, but you should probably optimize this as you can whenever you're, before you get it up there. You'll be shown summary of the files resized, their state, any errors that could happen. And it has some pretty awesome configurations. You can just take it by default, just all images are up at a certain size or a certain image quality. You can tell it, don't upsize something. If your optimizations end up making the file size larger, use the original, of course. And you can really get deep by using some asset source settings, which I've got a screenshot of a little bit of it here, but you can really get deep in modifying it per asset source, per volume. It's really nice. You also have a cropping tool that the client can use if they need to, crop something down. Craft has that built in, but it's a little bit wonky to play with. This happens automatically on upload. They can, quickly see and save it. He also has activating the crop interface on upload of new images is in the roadmap, and you can manage all the aspect ratios from the settings page, including renaming existing options, adding your own, etc. Most of the standard aspect ratio is already built in and they can select it right away. Please note this plugin is not a replacement for using image transforms through your other site. Also note the resizing of the images will permanently alter the original uploaded image. It's not going to make a copy of it and bloat your storage. So make sure to set the maximum allowed size to something that works for your purposes while balancing optimization and image quality without degradation. It's available 3.6 plus, 4 is out there, and you got to have PHP 7.25. And it's free. All right. What else can we do? Photoshop's expensive. We don't want clients resizing things in Word, even though it happens. So there's a ton of web tools out there that we can provide links to the client to help them in various aspects of optimizing their image before it comes up to the CMS. I'm going to go over a couple of them here. I share a lot of these with clients that just aren't as savvy with managing their content. There's Optimizilla, imagecompressor.com, literally does the same thing. You can put up 20 at a time. I think it has the pretty standard defaults of like 70% optimization on JPEGs, runs, PNG, Optum, JPEG Optum, all of the standard things that most of the tools use, runs a queue, and then they literally can just download those files straight to their hard drive after that to upload. Tiny PNG is literally built into every optimization tool that you can imagine. It also has a web tool, which is really cool. It really helps when people are using transparency and PNGs to make sure that the color depth is correct, because 32-bit, that can get really high. You can probably drop it down to 16 and have no degradation whatsoever on the quality. Still have good transparency and a significantly smaller web size or file size. WebP, we all know how cool WebP is, and it's kind of difficult to use a tool to generate these. So we'll touch on how to do this automated in a little bit, which is of course my preferred way of converting things to WebP, but there is a web tool, cloudconvert.com, WebP converter. It will take web JPEGs, animated GIFs, basically everything that WebP can support, and move it right over with controlling image resolution, quality, and file size right off the bat. And my favorite, the damn iOS HEIC. I can't tell you how many times I go to like post a bunch of like barbecue pictures in the Craft Discord channel, and then there's a bunch of broken. I'm like, damn it, that's right. I did it myself, So I love the quality of those HEIC photos. They don't work everywhere. You certainly do not want to put those in a CMS because they're not going to render on a website at all. So this is iOS friendly. It's super easy to use from a phone. It saves right back to your assets again, and saves it right to a JPEG. So, that can help a client a lot too. ResizeImage.net is pretty heavily built. You can see there's a lot of options in here. It does some optimizations. It does resizing. There's some cropping in there. Some clients like a lot of options and a lot of buttons to press. Some of them just want to dump something in there and take the standard, settings back out of it. And in the contrast of that is Simple Image Resizer, which literally has a drag bar, and you tell it how big or small you want the image to resize to, and then you drop one in there and it gives you a good one after that. Those are all awesome tools. We'll have links later for all of that stuff, but highly encourage you to, even your most savvy content editor clients, get them the tools in front of them, even on the website side of things, that they can, do as much as they can on their computer before they get it up to the CMS. So transforms. There's always the big debate on whether you manage and generate your transforms on upload versus when the page renders. So by default, Craft is not going to generate a transform until that transform is requested for the first time, whether that be in a queue job, or most of the time it's going to be when somebody hits the page for the first time and it renders. That's going to make that page load very slowly, depending on how many images you have in there and how many transforms you're going to be creating. It makes a lot of sense why they do that, because transforming and creating new images on a server, especially a web server, is very resource intensive. Fun story, had a client that I let him increase the upload limit to put some PDFs up, and then all of a sudden one day the server just kept falling over on itself, and I would restart Apache, it'd crash. Restart Apache, it crashed. And I'm like, what is going on here? Somebody had uploaded about 530 megabyte images. That site has about 25 transforms on it, and ImageMagick was filling up a temporary directory with, hey, I'm just trying to do what you're telling me to do here, and I'm trying to move 30 megabyte images and create 25 of them in here. I'm running out of space. And as soon as I would restart Apache, that process would start over again, and that temporary directory would get filled up and the whole thing would crash. So Craft will save it in a temporary directory, move it to a subdirectory, and subdirectory will be named according to what the transform is. So generally this is okay when you instruct a content editor to go to the page in a draft format or preview and let it render, or if you've got it live, hit it first and let the transform happen, refresh it a couple times, and the page should be good. Once the transform happens and Craft saves it, it's not going to do it again unless that asset changes or you change the transform settings, and then it'll go back and regenerate it. Otherwise, it's good to go, and it's going to serve it right away for the public. I definitely do not do page view size. So the benefits to the approach of doing it on page viewer when it's requested is Craft's only going to generate the transforms that the pages need. So if you've got 24 transforms, but your image is only used in 3 of those places on a template, when you hit those pages, it's not going to generate all the rest of them. It's only going to generate those 3. Kind of okay if you don't need them anywhere else. But it is going to take the page a while to render and load. They will see increased page load time since Craft has to generate those transforms at the time that the page is visited. Andre Elvin from ImagerX has a great explanation about how Craft generates transforms by default in a GitHub issue thread. And he says, they have to be generated at some point. They don't just appear like unicorns because you wanted them to, bummer. Generating transforms is a resource-heavy process, and doing it at runtime when a page is requested can be brutal. What happens when the configuration for generate transforms on page upload is set to false? Craft adds a job to the queue that will eventually create the transform. URL for the generate transform controller action is output in the markup instead of the URL. So you may have seen that if you look, and it's this big long URL because it's actually the route that Craft is rendering to hit that controller action that generates it. Piece of JavaScript is injected into the page to kick off the queue, because that normally wouldn't happen unless somebody's logged into the control panel or you have a cron job or a daemon set up to trigger or listen to the queue, which is by default how Craft runs things. The controller action is not scalable. A separate PHP process is open for each image request, and it waits using sleep and checks every second with a database query to see if the transform has been created. If it hasn't after 30 seconds, the controller tries to force generate it. In a scenario where you have a ton of images that have to be transformed or a high traffic site, that means a lot of visitors are going to get pages without images, and your server will have to handle a ton of PHP requests. And we all know from experience that's going to crash a low grade or a medium grade server very quickly. Craft already generates a ton of queries. So try to do the best we can to avoid that as much as possible. A better approach, in my opinion, is configuring Craft to do the transforms on the upload. So when you put them into the CMS and assets, have Craft go ahead and generate those transforms. There's a couple drawbacks to this that we'll talk about, but the simplest way to do this is in Craft config. There's a config option, generate transforms before page load. By default, it's set to false. Set it to true. That's going to force Craft to start and queue those transaction or transform jobs right away, not waiting like we just described and doing it's still going to do the same thing where it's waiting for a lag time in the server. 30 seconds goes by, it's going to force it. But generally your content editors are going to be putting images in there and then putting content in. So like that kind of happens in the background a little bit. And, hopefully by the time they finish and regularly publish the page, those transforms are going to be done. Sometimes it works awesome, sometimes it doesn't, but it will cut down on the page render times. Hopefully the transform would have happened by the time the public user accesses that page. An alternative to that is Imager X, which is a paid plugin. We'll touch on that pretty deeply in a little bit, but its new version, which is for Craft 4, has an auto generation functionality. I put the link up here for a nice description. Also, Andre writes super good docs. We talked about docs earlier, so his stuff's really, really easy to understand. It can be configured specific to certain asset volumes, specific transform handles. It can be drilled down to the field and element level for transforms will only be called for certain fields and certain components, which I think is super awesome. Generally I like to batch my transforms for responsive picture elements and maybe 5 or 6 per cinema, large desktop, regular desktop, tablet, large mobile, regular mobile. That's pretty much the pattern that I have. That's 5 transforms off the bat right there for each one. If I know that that's only going to be used on a hero, I'm going to specifically create transforms that are just for that hero, probably use Imager X and try to configure this to where it's going to generate just those on upload and not a full swath of every bit of transforms that you have in there. Also, Andrew has the Image Optimize plugin. It's a little wieldy to set up. You have to put a field in place in assets. You have to define all the transforms within there. It's really awesome because you're doing it all within the control panel. He has a visual aspect ratio boxes and all of that in there. I haven't dug too deep into it yet, but I have a pretty heavy project right now with a bunch of transforms, and I'm kind of thinking about putting it in place and trying it out. But it's designed literally specifically to pre-generate and save the URLs for your optimized image variants without database queries to fetch the information. He literally wrote the plugin because they said it was a feature request to do that back in early Craft 3. We'll put it on the roadmap. And he was like, you know what? I'm Andrew Welch. I'm going to make a damn plugin that does this. So I don't get too deep in that in this talk because honestly, those 2 plugins alone could be full talks about themselves on their own, but we'll get a little bit deeper in it. So if you're going to do it on upload using Imager X, that new feature I talked about tries to mitigate the pain of generating them, automated generation of transforms when an asset is uploaded or when an element is saved. You can also use a console command and element actions to run the auto generation anytime that you want, which is really cool because that's something that I've really been surprised has been missing from Craft Core for a long time, is that there's really no way to regenerate or generate the transforms again, unless you just go up and remove the image and change it again. It's just, there's a ton of console commands already for Craft. There's just not one about transforms, which I thought was weird for a long time, but they probably have a reason for it. This is done with queue jobs to keep the delays from happening when the assets are uploaded or elements are saved. Again, if you're running queue on a cron or not automatically, which is a Craft setting, make sure that you're actually running it or have a daemon that's listening for the jobs when you're doing this, or they're not going to happen for a while until your cron runs again. But this is a good example of a deeper configuration where he's saying for this volume, employee images only generate employee thumbnail and employee poster, which are 2 transform handles. For this other one, the general images do this whole list of them right here, which I think is super awesome. And then he's drilling down a little bit farther here to like the event section, hero image and event hero image only do those transforms for those assets that are used for that particular section, which is even more awesome. Image Optimize plugin, we touched on it a little bit a minute ago, but again, it's $59, not a huge cost. You manage all of this within the admin CP or your templates. It'll also do some image optimization as well as running the transforms right away. Excuse me. Out of the box, it does everything from SVG, PNG. You can add additional types. It also supports ImageX, which is a service we'll touch on just a little bit for responsive image transforms. Again, this you literally could have a whole presentation about the depth of this plugin, but all right, upload organization. All you have to do is literally right click on the images and make yourself a subfolder to organize your assets. It does not affect, there's no subdirectories created within assets. This is all just a visual and within control panel organization. Nothing to worry about from a storage standpoint or indexing or anything like that. It's literally there to help the client organize their assets, which we touched on earlier. It's really hard to like look through 3,000 assets in one folder. I do have a client that uses, I showed them this, and they probably have 40 folders in there, and they are great at organizing. I mean, it's logos, page headers, all the way down to like the component that it's used in. They're like, this has changed our lives from an organizational standpoint. It also really helps with housekeeping because say later on you've got these sorted by images and then a subfolder in there by campaign. And that campaign's over, you've 301 to all the URLs. You literally could just go in, select all of those assets in there, remove them. And you know that's safe because you've drilled this down to a subfolder. You know that they're only used for that campaign, which is super awesome. Try to make your assets as descriptive and semantic as possible. No IMG 052-3-4. You'll never know what that's for. Cool, you've got a little thumbnail there. You can click it and see it, but like a context in the name of the file really helps. It's just that extra mile going. That helps tremendously with organization and housekeeping when you need to know, like, is that for a campaign or something else? I can delete it. Asset usage plugin, which I showed you a little bit, can help with that. We'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. All right, storage strategies. Where do we keep these damn images? So most of the time, you're going to have a medium grade, low to medium grade server. Storage space on a server, most of them give you 5-6 gigs nowadays. You're probably usually pretty safe with that for a brochureware site or something like that. As you start to really scale up, client adds a blog. Client then adds news post. They're not a blog. Then they add something else in there. That really starts to bloat, especially if they're not adhering to the things that we've already touched on: organization, housekeeping, all of that. If you're going to store on the server and not a remote site, which we'll talk about in a minute, make sure that you have enough storage space. I have had one client in the past year and a half whose site crashed, and it took me about an hour to figure out that they filled up the damn hard drive on the server. Like, who does that on a website these days? Oh my God, it actually happened. It's like, yeah, you got a bunch of assets in here. We got to remove them. Took them out, server restarted. It worked fine after that. So if you've used up all of the storage space, it doesn't have room to write temporary files. There's always something that has to get written when it's making database connections and reading from a database. If it can't write that, then the site's not going to work. If you are using Served, which is a specialty craft host, or Fort Rabbit, they both have plugins available that you can hook up your storage on Craft to both of their storage solutions. I think Fort Rabbit uses their own server system. Served is backboned off of DigitalOcean, so they probably use DigitalOcean Spaces or S3. Side note, in a couple months, we're going to have a presentation about Craft hosting, and the guy that makes and runs Served will be a remote panelist at that. So he'll get to touch on what makes it more unique and why. But from assets and helpers standpoint, I think they are superb when it comes to the management. I've got a screenshot of like the cost and like what you get in there. So it's $79, which actually is not a lot of money for hosting a damn website these days. 5 gigs of assets, 2 cron jobs backup or background tasks, 3.5, what is it? Yeah, 3.5 CPUs. That could totally handle a pretty robust website with a lot of images on it now. But the stuff that he offers with his asset storage, you automatically get different environments for local staging and production. There's a CDN and edge caching built into the storage, zero config off server image transforms, which we'll touch on in a little bit. He has ImageRX extensions to make use of the served asset platform. Now that I said that, I think I did remember him say that it is an S3 setup, that he has it set up to where it's shared but not shared, between clients. He has an image optimize extension to tap into Andrew's plugin if you need, static caching, token interjection and validation, automatic static cache busting when you save an element or an entry, support for using the debug toolbar. It's pretty awesome. Serve's pretty cool. I've only got one site on it, by the way, so I don't make any money from Serve for this, but most of my sites are on Arcus Tech still. But so remote, you kind of learn pretty quickly that. Hold on one second, my wife's texting me. That you can quickly outgrow your server space, or you're actually serving images from the same server that your website is serving from. That can decrease the resource allocation and stuff like that on it. So there's awesome stuff out there that you can store your images. They all integrate with Craft really easily with a plugin. They're just straight out of the box. S3, we all know about S3. It's relatively inexpensive. I say that with big quotation marks around it. Just be careful. Don't auto bill anything on it. Google Cloud Storage is even cheaper than that and a pretty good alternative to S3. If you're into the whole Azure thing, they have a blob storage plugin. And DigitalOcean Spaces, if you are on DigitalOcean, you get a discount for their spaces, which is, again, just like S3 or cloud storage. It's just a cloud storage setup environment. And you can use DigitalOcean Spaces without having a DigitalOcean hosted site too. All of these integration plugins are free. Most of them are maintained by the people, I think, except for the Azure Blob storage is not managed by Microsoft, but they all work really good. I've used all but the Azure one at various sites, and I mean, it's literally like a 5-minute setup on all of them, and they're good to go. All right, image transforms. So this kind of gets into the beef of our talk here. This is one of the first things that I realized why Craft is, in my opinion, the superior content management system is all of its built-in tools that can transform images and create them on the fly and let you manage them is awesome. Like, there's stuff in WordPress you can do that with. It gets a little tough. Sometimes crashes, not super superb. So we're going to touch on why to use transforms. Why would you use them? Transforming them directly in Craft, using a service called, or using the ImagerX plugin, which is a paid plugin, to manage your transforms and do a little bit more with it, and taking it to the next level, which is subscribing to a service called ImageX that offloads the transforms to their servers. So why would you use transforms? Well, first of all, WebP, super cool. Next gen image format. We won't worry about IE11 ever again, thank God. But you can see you've pretty much got green all the way across the board now. It is 2022. You can use these on production easy. I've been using WebP for 3 years now, basically for everything. Super great file savings, very, very little. I mean, they're like not lossless at all. They can handle transparency. You can convert just about everything that you use on a website to WebP, and you will literally notice like it is a huge file savings on there. Plus, Core Web Vitals is literally going to look through your site and see if you're serving next-gen information. If you're not, you're going to get hit. Your benchmark, you're already going to have that red right there. You're not using the next-gen. Why are you not using the next-gen? That's going to help with your first contentful paint, your largest contentful paint. All of those metrics are going to be better because you're literally serving a high-quality image with a very low file size, and it's going to make CWV very happy, especially if you take the approach that I'll detail in a minute, where you're using strategic transforms for picture elements with responsive images and serving a relatively close sized image to the viewport that you're loading at that time. Google Core Web Vitals loves that. They love that because, Core Web Vitals, they test immediately on a 3G mobile as your first benchmark, and that sucks. I mean, that's like, oh my God, 4G sucks. I'm trying to test something with 3G. I mean, you know, we're lucky here in the US and especially around here. Like I got fiber at home. Not everybody's like that. You know, there's a lot of people that that's literally the only connection they have to the internet is a cheap Google 3G phone, you know, so they just want, they're good, do evil right over. All right, transforming and craft. There's a couple different ways you can manage your transforms and do them. Manage them directly in the CMS. This is how I prefer to do them. It's clean, organization-wise. It helps you keep a common pattern, naming structure between them. You can override them on the fly per usage and templates if you need to. I usually don't do that. But the drawback is if you're not using Imager-X with the stuff we talked about earlier, where you're being very, very strategic about what transforms happen for what point in the website. If you're just doing it out of the box, literally Craft is going to generate all of those for every single image you upload to the CMS, whether you're using them or not. So that can kind of create bloat. I go back and forth on, you know, whether like this is one that we're working on right now with Soul Space. This is literally just, let's see, how many is that? 1, 2, that's only 3 components out of about 40 components that we have in place. And they all need stuff cropping, stuff fitting here and there. So that scroll is going to get long and longer and longer. Probably the most transforms I've ever created on a website, but we are using Image-X, which I'll touch on in a minute. We are using Imager-X. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we're not bloating the server or putting too much demand on the server when we are creating all of these, because it's needed to serve cinema and a desktop and a small desktop and a tablet so that we can hit those core web vital metrics right away. I mean, we're approaching this the right way. It can look daunting. Somebody that's not as super familiar with this can look in there and be like, holy shit, why do you have so many transforms in place? And it's like, well, we kind of have to, you know, like whether it's art directed or just making sure that we're serving the right stuff to the right viewports. You can manage them in templates. And as I was working on this slide deck, I thought, I wonder what other people do. So I went to Discord and I asked, hey, do you manage them in templates or do you manage them in CMS? And pretty much everybody said, I feel like doing them in the admin's better. You don't have different values in the markup for different templates. It could happen, which is something I didn't even think about. What if you created a template and you named an image transform one way, and somebody later on created another template and they're creating the transform in the template and they named it the same damn thing. And then you overrode everybody else's image in there. It sucks. And then the admin, much more maintainable. This guy says we only really have about 4 standard sizes. They don't need to be the exact fit. A cached image that's slightly larger, in my opinion, is better than a zillion extra transforms. He would hate my transforms, but to do this in a template, though, you would just set a variable. Here's one example, thumb. You give it a couple arguments. How do you want it? Do you want it to crop or fit or resize? What width, height, quality, and focal point, top, center, bottom, whatever. You create a hash that defines those parameters, and then you pass that hash in either a get URL, get width, and get height. I've been trying to do this a little bit more, like actually outputting the initial width and height, because that's another thing that Core Web Vital is starting to look for to prevent its reflow. What is it called? I can't remember the name of the actual metric, but like how much does stuff shift on the page as these images are starting to load in? If you can frame, what is it? Repaint. Yep. So if you can frame it, you know, and it's still downloaded, but it knows initially it's going to be 700 by 500, then that reduces how much of that is coming down the pipe. And then you literally just call the get URL with the thumb, the handle of the transform that you are created. You do the same thing for transforms that are managed in the CMS. See how we're doing on 718. All right, Imager-X, probably one of the most awesome plugins for a very low price of $99 for the Pro. It does all of this stuff. So no database queries, they're all file-based transforms, local and cloud, local images, external images, either the transforms themselves. You can use S3, Google Cloud Storage, write your own storage interface. It'll create WebP, AVIF, which I haven't messed with too much lately, but it's starting to become more popular because of the proliferation of like animated GIFs. And, those can get pretty heavy. AVIF can support that with the same type of quality file savings as WebP. JPEG XL hasn't really taken off as much as people kind of thought it would, but you can still use those. Literally every, whoops, crap. I'll get back. Touch bar is awesome, but it's like the tiniest little things here. All right, give me 1 second. Let me get back where we were. All right. JPEG Optim, Tran, Moz JPEG, literally everything that you can think of, that every tool that optimizes anything is all built into Imager X. Console commands for batch generating transforms, which is new in the 4 version. Has a nifty utility in the utilities admin panel. You can clear transform caches, get debug information. You can batch them if you need to. Offload all your transforms to ImageX, which I copy and paste the opens a new window thing into the slides. That's why I shouldn't work on my slide deck the day of the presentation. We'll touch on ImageX here in just a few minutes, but it's an awesome service as well. You can write your own transformer if you want to. I don't know why you would do that. And then you can do all of the stuff that like Photoshop does, or one of the other, like, Sketch or something like that. Interlaced, progressive images, animated GIFs, support for fallback images if something's missing, so you don't get the broken image in there. That's a pretty cool add-on that I have been using a little bit lately. Especially in a development environment, if you don't sync your assets down and it tries to start doing transforms on images that don't exist at the moment, then Imager X can like serve a little temporary thing, which is pretty cool. Image effects, I don't use these as much, but you can transform an image into grayscale, negative, blur, sharpen, gamma, colorize, color blend, tint, unsharp mask. All of that stuff can be done on the fly in the template, which is pretty cool. Lots of placeholder images, even the new blur hash thing, which shows like a blurry low-grade image of something as it's downloading, or if it's coming in from like lazy load or something like that. Watermarks, if you need to add that. I've had a couple clients that wanted to add watermarks to images so nobody stole them. People are still going to steal the image, like what? It's the internet. You can get color information, palette, dominant color if you need to. And that's something that I have been doing a little bit. And there's another plugin I'll talk about in a little bit that, just render a box with the color of the main color of the image as that thing downloads or you're lazy loading in. That really does help with the repaint, because you actually have something in there. Photoshop or Facebook does that a lot. You'll see the like little gray boxes of things that are loading. And a bunch of other color utilities if you need to address lightness or stuff that I literally never do with anything on the website, because you really probably should do that before you get the image up there. But it comes in 2 editions. Light has a lot of this stuff in it. If you need to use ImageX or like some of the more detailed things, like all of the color stuff, you got to buy the Pro license. He has all the drivers and everything for every type of storage system that you can imagine, and all that interfaces with the Pro version. It's $99 though. Like, spend the money for your biggest lead source of your company, your website. All right, ImageX. I started learning about this last year, and it is a paid service that I want to say Instagram used before Facebook bought them. And you literally don't do any transforms on your web server. You configure it through Imager X, and when Craft requests the transform, Imager X sends the actual request to ImageX's servers. ImageX's servers are already, based on your configuration, connected to your storage. So whether it's images stored on your server or S3 or Google Cloud Storage, you've got it connected to that. So Imager X says, I've got this image, Craft needs this transform, perform it on your server. And ImageX does it lightning fast, and then serves it from their edge cache, which is pretty global CDN. I don't think it's Cloudflare. I think it's Akamai behind the scenes, but both of them are as fast as lightning anyway. you almost can drop it in place with like 5 minutes of configuration and a couple config files, and it just works out of the box. It's not super expensive. I'll show you the plans here in a minute. Its pricing is based on how many source images you have. So say you have 500 source images, but you have 500 transforms that have to happen on each of those, and that multiplies up to like 50,000 transforms that happen. You're only charged for how many source images that are having to index. It doesn't matter how many transforms you do on each of those images. You can have between 2 and 10 unique sources based on the plan level that you're at. Generally, 2 would be used for like a staging and production, because you're going to, the assets are going to be different between those. You don't want to be like overriding stuff from staging to production. You could have dev, staging, QA, UAT, and production, which I've literally worked on sites that had all of those environments, because part of their publishing workflow. I highly recommend it. That experience that I told you about earlier, where the server kept crashing because the 30 megabyte images were up on a landing page that was already published and was getting high traffic because it was a campaign that was happening. I can't take the images down. I certainly could like save them to my hard drive, put them in Photoshop, resize them, put them back up there. Server kept crashing. So like I literally could not do that. And I thought I could spend 40 minutes with the server down, connect this to image X, and I guarantee you within 20 minutes, the site will be back up. And it literally did that. I got the client to say, what do you need me to do? Send them to the site, said, sign up for this plan, give me the login. I spent 30 minutes or so indexing all of the assets, setting up Imager X to do a couple transforms on those key pages where the landing page was getting that traffic. Turned it on. It started serving literally right away, and the server did not crash again after that. And the client was like, man, you really saved our neck on that, And I'm like, actually, you kind of did, because you paid for the service on your credit card. But like, this is the level of cost and effort that you have to take these days, because if your website is your number one lead generation source, like, why would you not? And I had talked to this guy in the past about using it, and they're kind of apprehensive about, I'm already spending this with you guys, and I'm already paying this much to Architect for the hosting. Why do I need to do that? And so I finally convinced him by saying, how much do you spend on coffee a month for the office? I don't know, $150. I said, this is $75 a month, and it is your number one generation of leads for your company. If this doesn't work, you're not selling your product. So why would you not take the $75 a month and put it towards that when you're already spending $150 for coffee? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, what do I need to do to get this in place? So like, there's some additional costs with it. Like if you need to serve, like they do serve from an ImageX domain. It's not your domain. If you need to do that, you got to pay like $50 extra a month, and like maybe $100 fee, and they do like a Fastly SSL certificate, and it's installed on their servers. Still not a lot of money, like if your website's bringing in 120 grand a year and you're already spending 20,000 a month on Google ads, like, why would you not? Like, you got to make the thing you're sending the ads to work properly. So we'll touch on that a little bit more in a little bit, but there's some additional Imager X options. There's a competing service called Image Boss that I've heard is not as robust as Image X and sometimes crashes, but it's way cheaper. They do have a connection with that. I probably would never in my wildest dreams want to build an AWS serverless transformer, because if you've ever done anything in AWS, it's like a nightmare already. But it's not for the faint of heart, and Andre says that, like, I'll tell you how to do it, but like, you better put on your big boy britches before you get in there and try to do this, because you got to do it all yourself. But I imagine the cost of that is probably even lower because you're literally building and configuring everything. But he has a connection with that, but they both do require the Imager X Pro Edition, which again is only $99. All right, that was a lot. Responsive images. What do we actually do with all these transformed images that we just put all of this effort into generating? So I've talked about this already. Core Web Vitals are going to benchmark heavily against the usage of next-gen image formats, and they're also going to squawk at you if you're not appropriately sizing the image per viewport and breakpoints. Both of these are easy wins if we just put a little bit of effort into our twig and transforms. Uh, a day and a half of work and a pretty big code base, just let this thing run, and you could easily bring, with just this and a quick optimization of CSS and first mile and a little bit of JavaScript optimization, you could bring something from a 30s up to late 60s, early 70s, maybe up to an 80s in Core Web Vital. After that, you've really got to work hard to gain a couple more points here and there. But you can get it almost to green. That's pretty good for most clients. 30 suck. Like, you look at that and you're like, man, I really need you to pay me to get this up a little bit. So the way a responsive image works, the browser is going to come and make its request. It's going to find a picture element. You've got within that picture element source elements, and then they have an attribute called an SRC set. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, but it's basically just a long string that has an image and then the size that the viewport needs to be where that image is going to get served. The browser is super smart, and it's going to say, all right, I'm on a 768 tablet, and this picture says, if I'm on a 768, only download this image to start with. And if you've done it correctly, like you've generated all of your transforms, like I showed you a minute ago, then you've already got one that's super optimized to that size. Granted, I think I read recently that it can scale. It'll try to say, is your image within 20% of that? Because you can't literally create an image for every single pixel of a viewport size, but it's going to pick up the standard ones, which is what? 320, 468, 768, 1024, the ones that you're matching up to. And Google's going to say, if you've got something relatively close within there, instead of taking your cinema size and scaling it down to 768, then I'm going to give you a pass on that. You've actually put the most effort into doing this. You're going to get happy Core Web Vitals for the most part. So picture elements with SRC set and WebP /avif. I think that's how you say it, but I've not done that yet with any of these. I have used this, and this is a couple screenshots because the thing is like this tall, but it's a macro. I've used this for a couple years now, and I just remembered I did not get an example of how you actually call the macro, but essentially, here's the arguments that I'm passing to this macro. I'm sending the actual initial image, which is the raw image itself. Actually, I have two options here. So I could send a different initial image, like if I wanted to do one of those like blurry background, styles or something like that. And I'll show you how that's used in a minute. The raw image, a array of the transform handles that I want to happen within this. It gets output in the SRC set in a minute. Another array of the pixel values of the breakpoints that I want to correspond to those transforms. I send an alt tag attribute from the component file name if that's a backup if they don't have the field in place, which really should be using alt text for everything. And then a special attribute that will write out the load lazy, the new like browser friendly non-JavaScript lazy load thing. You can pass that as a boolean whether you want it or not. And then I'm generating this long string here, which is my sizes attribute, which is another thing the SRC set needs. And it's literally, I loop over the breakpoints and I say, if you get to this minimum width at 100 viewport width, then write out this image. And then here is the actual picture element. You can see I'm using Imager here, and I'm saying if the server itself can generate the WebP image, run through this loop right here. And then I'm starting to loop my breakpoints. I'm creating an array of the width and the quality level that I want that WebP to be generated by Imager. And then I'm calling Imager to transform each of those images based on the array of breakpoints that I just put in there, and a couple of the format, like the format WebP, and I want it to interlace because you always want to have your stuff interlaced so it starts to load the stripes as it comes down. And then I'll write out the source attribute, or the source element within the picture. So I've got a loading lazy attribute because I told it to load load. I have the SRC set, which I'll show you the screenshot of in just a minute. And that's literally that big long string, which is here's the image, here's the viewport size that I want it to serve at, comma, the next set of them. Sizes, the browser does need this, which I generated earlier, and that's just saying wait until you get to this minimum width, like a media query, before you start to do this. And then you have to have a type so that, you know, Apache knows or Nginx knows what it's actually rendering. If the server can't, or if I don't send any breakpoints, like if I just want to do this one time, which is pretty rare, then I'm just going to call Imager to transform that single image, and then just pass it to a macro that I have in place, which I'll show you in a second, that creates the SRC set on its own. Imager can do that because it's transforming it and I'm telling it to with a big array of stuff. But if I don't have that array of stuff, I need to manually do it myself because it's only going to be one part of the SRC set. So it's another macro. I just passed the other arguments and the stuff that I just generated in there. Then we continue on over here. If we have the breakpoints, then we need to fall back. So this is getting less and less useful as browsers have pretty much gotten green across the board for support of WebP. A couple years ago, when I was still supporting IE11 on some things. This is the power of a source. When this gets rendered out on the front end, the browser can say, well, shit, I don't know what to do with a WebP. So over here, I'm saying, all right, then instead, look through, figure out what type of image it is. Is it a JPEG? Is it a PNG? Is it a GIF? Or is it an SVG? Also run this through all of my transforms that I've specified for, you know, this component or this use of it here. But now I'm writing out an additional source element within my picture, and it's just going to be for JPEGs or PNGs or GIFs or whatever. I think probably in the next year I'll be able to take this out because pretty much all my new contracts are not IE11. Like it's Edge 21 and up, you know. So if it's green across the board, then this is stuff that you can start to dry out your macros. So initial image, you can have two ways that you actually write out the image itself, which is a requirement of the picture. It's got to have a place that the browser is going to start substituting the SRC that gets rendered for that image. So to the browser, the only thing it really cares about is the image, because you're telling it dynamically that take this picture, read these sources, and then render this image with all of the stuff that I just told you to do, whether it's WebP and you're on 768 or you're a high retina or something like that. You know, I'm going to give you all of the information to serve the image, but you're not going to have 20 different image tags in there. It's called a replaceable asset. And if you are sending a initial image, which, you know, like say I mentioned a minute ago, say you're generating a blurry image version of it, you know, for like lazy loading or something like that, then you can set your initial SRC to that. As the browser starts to download or render those optimized images, it's going to serve that first. Otherwise, you can just use the raw image itself. And I put data initial because I have some JavaScript going along with this for the turning off the lazy loading. But other than that, these are all standard attributes for an image tag. You've got a class, an alt, the SRC. The important stuff for responsive images is you have that sizes string that's generated from an array, and then I'm calling that SRC set macro again, which is over here. And you can see I'm literally just generating a big long string based on looping over the transforms and the breakpoints that I'm sending. What does all this do? Because it's literally about this tall on the screen right now. And I went to take a screenshot and I zoomed it down as far as I could get it. And I was like, nobody's going to be able to read this at all. This is what it outputs. And so you'll see I've got my picture here. I've got the class that I passed to it. Here is my initial WebP source. And This is a great example of an ImageX URL that I had the client pay extra so that it was on their domain, itera.us and CNAMED images. That URL actually serves from ImageX's CDN. And the funny story behind that, Hytera is a walkie-talkie company, and they're based in China. And so we set them up with that, and that long story about the landing page not working and everything. It was great for the US and the North America. And then the next morning I woke up to an email from the Chinese people, and they were like, man, it's not loading the images over here. And I thought, the damn great firewall. I guarantee you that the ImageX stuff. And so I sent a support ticket, and they were like, yep, they won't let us get those ImageX domains through. But we're going to give you a free SSL certificate because of the trouble. Usually you got to pay that fee that I told you about a minute ago. But, you'll see my SRC set is literally just a long string. Here's this size image, serve it at 58 width. Here's another one at 992. Here's another one at 1250. Here's another one at 1800. Those correspond to the pixel values. So if you load a screen between 1250 and 1800, you're going to get this size that I have correspond to a transform, and it's WebP. And if you hovered over down here with the SRC, the browser would pop up a window, a little dialogue, and it would say, here's the one that I'm rendering right now. And it's probably going to be that one right there because you're on a big screen. If you're on a smaller one, it's going to say, all right, I'm rendering this image right now. Google Core Web Vitals loves that. Here's my additional source attribute for the JPEGs, which, like I said, we'll probably get rid of in a little bit. And then this is a little bit special because they, in this case, this element was for a slider, and it's called Splide, and Splide actually had lazy loading built into it. So it would only load the first or the second slide, but it had to have a data attribute, and it had to be kind of like an SRC set. So you'll see I have my data Splide lazy SRC set, and it's loaded out here. That's a unique use case here. You usually don't need that unless you're doing it the same. And then, funny enough, this is a carryback for progressive enhancement. If none of this works, then you got to render an image. So like tucked inside this no script thing right here, because this was in the slider, I try to progressive enhance everything. It just writes out literally a raw image tag with the biggest version of the image. So a lot of work to render a pretty good amount of markup that really makes the browser happy, helps your user with perceived performance because they're going to get a pretty well-sized image that's going to be high quality, low file size, not lossless, and be awesome. So that was a lot of work to explain how that works. So the next thing we'll talk about here is eager loading. And so this is another unique thing to Yi and Craft, but also is touched on in Laravel a little bit here too. But if you've ever turned on the debug toolbar and looked at how many queries Craft renders when it needs to ask, how do I get this stuff to render this page out from the database? There's a lot, like a whole bunch. You can quickly cause like an N+1 query problem. Crap, I did it again. Yes, and I found the slide right away on the touch bar. I'm literally the only dev in the world that loves my touch bar. I just ordered a brand new M1 Pro, and I'm like, I lose my touch bar because I got the 16-inch Pro and it doesn't have the touch bar. I'm like, no, I lost it. I know. Yeah, well, that's, yeah. All right, so the N1 problem, I can explain it like this. So say you've got a front-end query paginated at 25 entries for 100 channel entries in a blog. And then each of those channel entries that you're going to display has a little bitty slider on it, to show stuff in a thumbnail, which is something that actually happens. So Craft's going to perform a lookup query for each of those images in that slideshow for each of these 25 entries that you're querying, even though you're paginating it. So there's 250 additional queries on top of the one that's happening, on top of everything else on the page that's happening, an SEO image, the other components on the page, stuff in the footer, stuff in the header, your navigation. Yeah, you've got 1,000 queries happening right there. So, it'll work. Craft does its best as it can to get, stuff rendered to the page as quickly as possible. But with eager loading and a criteria parameter, we can kind of give Craft hints on when you do this query, go ahead and grab all of this stuff too in the same query, and let's reduce how much is happening and eliminate this n+1 problem right here. And it used to be a little bit more rough, and also got to use the timeless meme of Drake, which will never get old. All right, so Craft 4 introduced Laravel collections. Craft 3, you have to hit all to get everything. But the issue there is if you're eager loading items, when you eager load this right here, which is a body element and then a teaser image, what you get back is an actual array. And so you're having to hit with an array syntax, you know, the square brackets with a 0 in it. And that's fine, you know, no big deal. But let's say that later in the page or somewhere else that that component is rendered, you're not actually eager loading. Well, that's not going to work. That's going to fail and cause a twig error. So you're going to have two different versions of how you're actually rendering that image. And I'm not the hugest person on keeping my templates dry. I'll repeat stuff all day if I can get it shipped quicker, but it does get messy and it leads to confusion when somebody else comes into a component and doesn't understand why are you calling array on this one, but not array on this one. It's the same component. So with Laravel collections, you actually get all eager loaded elements or non-eager loaded elements as a collection instead of an array. The syntax is a little bit different, so you got to call dot first before you get your URL. But you can literally render this right here for stuff that's eager loaded using the with, or stuff that doesn't have the eager loaded, and it's the same component. So that kind of draws out your templates a little bit. Craft Quest has a really awesome article about how powerful it is, not only to use collections for eager loading, but just in general. I've converted 2 Craft 3 to 4 sites, and I literally don't have .all in anything. I mean, I'm usually using collections for everything. I don't think it adds extra overhead. It's scalable. It's pretty awesome. But in the context of eager loading, this is, and not. Blitz. So this is another thing. I'm going to have the guy from Blitz on in a couple months talking about connecting Blitz with Cloudflare, which is super cool. But yeah, just to touch on Blitz, if you're not using Blitz, it's awesome. Static rendering of page, and it caches that and then can send it up the wire to Cloudflare, Akamai, and then invalidate it off the bat. Pull that in with Sprig, which is kind of like a dynamic loading thing for Craft CRSF tokens or other stuff that you don't need to be static and need to be re-rendered on a static cache template. And you've got a really powerful system and some super fast sites. That walkie-talkie company, I have that set up completely on Blitz, Cloudflare. And I'm not kidding. Those pages that have a ton of images on them, I'm eager loading, optimizing with transforms, I'm serving with picture element, with WebP. They render before you even finish clicking the damn button on the browser to go to the page. Like it is so lightning fast. It's incredible. I'm just like, I cannot believe how fast this website renders. Now, granted, Core Web Vitals still freaking find something to complain about on it, but you know, it's probably up in the upper 80s on average across the board with it. They came from 30s to an upper 80s. It took some work to get there. So recently he has added, he used to have, and I think he still does, a plugin called Blitz Recommendations, separate from Blitz. And it would, if Blitz rendered something or even Blitz was not involved, it would just look at Craft's log when it would render stuff and say, you could probably save by eager loading this thing, this matrix field that's coming down, or this asset or something like that. So he just put out a blog post last week. He said, you know, Blitz 4.1 is out. I'm going to merge that into Blitz itself now. There's no reason why you can't get that information from Blitz right away. So he's added that in. There's no excuse for not eager loading elements in your Twig templates, but now he has this really cool Blitz hints thing built into The control panel, it also hooks into debug toolbar if you have that turned on locally, or based on your user on production, which I do for everything. It's now able to distinguish between eager loaded opportunities for regular element queries. Elements auto injected via route variables, which is really cool and which used to be something that you couldn't do. The former should be prioritized and always visible, whereas eager loading elements on auto injected image elements is less critical and hidden by default and don't count towards the badge total. So hats off to, and here's a little video of what it looks like when you're in there looking at it. Actually, I didn't even watch this before I put it in. Eager loading related to this field. Show the route variable hints. Example, he even has the markup example of how you can improve it, which is freaking awesome. Blitz is $80 or $90 or something like that. Hands down pays for itself out of the, I mean, just, it's so worth the money to put that in place. Now, it does take a little bit of getting used to from an editor aspect, especially if you have Cloudflare involved and you got to tell them, if you invalidate that, it's going to take a couple minutes for that to clear the entire Cloudflare edge cache, especially if you've got a big site and it's cached a lot around the world. So some awesome tools that we've talked about here. Some effort on our part to get, better editor experience and performance experience, but like all the stuff that we talked about, if you can convince your client to pay you to do this stuff, the dividends pays off like tremendously for their core web vitals, their perceived performance to the user, their measurable performance. And the thing that has really helped me convince clients to spend the money on this, find the clients that are spending 5-10 grand a month on Google ads. Tell them if your core web vitals come up, those ads get cheaper. You get a better reach for those, and the cost of them will come down, and you can spend $7 grand, or you can continue to spend 10 grand and increase your lead reach by 30%. That's the kind of numbers that like will go up the chain to somebody and they'll say, hell yes, pay that developer, the couple thousand it takes in a week of development to do this type of work. And the stuff that we've talked about today takes some effort up front and then runs automatically after that. And if you can put in the education to the editors as much as you can to get these images optimized as they're going up the pipe, but also put in the tools that we've talked about today, you've got a winning combo, like hands down. So plugins, I even did a whole talk about how much I love plugins. Like that's another thing that's awesome about Craft. WordPress plugins kind of suck, and they're always going to market you with like everything on the dashboard, and it just looks so wonky and gross. Plugin store is getting even better now because they're filtering out stuff that doesn't work on Craft 4. You've got 2 different versions of the store now. Plugin developer has to keep up with the release cycle. They are thinking about adding ratings and reviews, which I think would be cool. Right now, you kind of just have to look at how many active installs and then go and look at how many issues they have in GitHub before you judge them whether it's worth it or not. That's still not, I mean, what is that? 10 minutes of effort to decide if something's worth it or not. Try it out on staging. If it works, great. Here's some plugins that can help. We've already talked about a couple of these. Imager X, crap. I did it again. Yes, I picked it. Perfect. Okay. Imager X, Lite is $49, Pro is $99. It's elevator pitch. Craft plugin for doing image transforms, optimizations, and manipulations. It does all the things that the built-in image transform functionality can do and so much more. That's awesome. The elevator door opens. Image Optimize allows you to automatically create and optimize responsive image transforms from your Craft 3 assets. It works equally well with native image transforms and image services like ImageX with 0 template change, $59. Asset usage. So I showed you that earlier. It's a column that you can turn on in the display of your assets. It'll look through all of your entries for asset fields and say, am I actually rendering that on anything? Is it attached to anywhere in a query? If it's not, it'll give you that little red thing and say, yes, it is, or no, it's not. Gives you a little bit of more reassurance from a housekeeping standpoint. It's free. Checks the relation tables. That's what I was looking for. So it can be compatible with Matrix, Super Table, Neo, I think, anything that you're digging down deep. Side note, my talk that I submitted to .all is about what Avery does now with content modeling here, where you're not really using matrix and big page builders. You're actually maintaining components as separate entry types and bringing those in with relations. It's awesome. Keep your fingers crossed that my talk gets approved at all. We did that a long time, 2019, I think. I did a presentation about it here, and I learned that from Trevor at Ray Ward, and I was like, oh, like this is so. I still to this day I'll still build websites that have Neo with some matrix fields with super table with another table in it. Sometimes the clients need that. They need to be able to see everything on the page, and they just don't make that context connection. But anyway, off subject. But image resizer literally does what it says. It resizes your assets when it's uploaded. Huge images can be resized not to use up unnecessary disk space, kept at a reasonable resolution. Not a replacement for image transforms, free. Untransformed. So this is pretty cool. It will transform or replace the transform URLs if you're doing it the cheap way, which I described earlier, and letting Craft render it on page load when it first requests it. And instead of rendering nothing because it's still trying to hit that controller route and generates that huge URL in there, it'll actually put a placeholder image or a color, or you can tell it to do an abstract blurry version of it. It's pretty cool. I haven't used it in production yet, but mainly because I try to do them on upload nowadays, but it could be something cool to like do if you're in the process of, optimizing a site and you still want to do that quick, file savings right there. You could put this in place, a 5-minute configuration. And, as you're actually converting that site's image transforms to happen on upload, this can kind of, bridge the gap there on performance wise. It's free. Color extractor. This is another cool thing that I've been trying to do is just render a big block of the main color of the image to help with reflow and all of that. It's also free. Doesn't require extra database queries, and you literally do all of it in markup. It's like just a little twig variable that you call before you call the image. Blur hash is a free service that will blur an image as a very low res, like 20K version of the image, as one pass. It's not interlaced, and you use it to display while the full resolution image is loading. That's a good use for that. Now I've already forgotten the initial image in my picture element. That's a great way you could call that for in a raw image directly within the macro, and it'd work great. I haven't used Jitter, and I actually just found it when I was looking for additional plugins to put into this talk, but apparently it works kind of like ImageX. It uses local storage or AWS S3, and it uses ImageMagick, which Craft already uses, or what is the other package that? Yeah, GD. So I don't know if it works or not, but it sounds pretty cool. It's free. So, you could kind of try it out and see if it works. And if not, convince your client. How much do you pay on coffee for a month in your office? Put that one in your back pocket. So Lightkeeper, I install this on every site that I've done any type of site speed or core web vital mitigation to. It's a little widget. It sits in the sidebar on the entry, and it will give you a relatively close core web vital metric and page speed metric right there. As they start to add images, it'll render it in a queue job. I usually tell my clients, if you're changing content in there, publish the page and then go back to it in the CMS and look at it. You also could open up a new tab and run it in there, but this keeps them within the dashboard, and they can quickly make a change within there. Like, oh crap, I put up a really big image and I probably could scale that down a little bit better. But if you take all the stuff that we talked about today, you can reassure your client that they're not going to have the opportunity to mess it up like that. You can't really control how crappy the form iframe that they put in place is, or like the Wistia video embed, or like whatever the hell else they're going to put on the page, because the client literally is going to put everything they possibly can do on a page. But this kind of gives them the benchmark and a little bit of like a slap on the hand. Like, okay, if you're in the 80s, but this blog post is down in the 40s right now, you might want to think about looking at this and kind of figuring out what you did wrong, or like email us and say, what did I do wrong here? Because that's going to start bringing down your metrics in 20 days whenever that rescan happens. All right, so wrap up. We've explored strategies and tools that help with challenges. Move this out of the way. We've outlined some great editor experience strategies and tools. We've reviewed some approaches to assure resilient server resource allocation. I actually wrote that myself, and I was like, wow, that's some big words. Great way to describe what we're actually doing. Detailed some front end markup that meets or exceeds both user perceived performance and measurable performance benchmarks. So what you can take away to do for your team and also your clients. Practice and educate effective asset upload management. Choose and use a strategic storage solution that best meets the needs of your CMS assets. Set up and utilize smart image transforms to optimize your site speed and server resource allocation. Utilize and serve responsive images to your front end users. Always eager load your assets and craft queries for optimal DB utilization, as well as twig rendering, and install and use the plugins that can assist in all of these challenges. All right, questions, answers if I can do them, and please save your autograph request until after the show. And that's always good if nobody has any questions, because that means that I've been thorough.
That last plugin, the Lighthouse one, like, can you control who sees it, like what user groups?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, you sure can. It's got a thing in the user management tool. It's one checkbox though. It's not something that you can say, let them run it. It's just on or off, but if you have like a user group, like I try to manage like editors and third-party people that come in and analytics people and let them see, I usually turn that on for like the analytics and the site editors. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of cool plugins I want to check out now. I hadn't heard of half of them. So.
Yep. I mean, I think the plugin store is getting way more organized now. Used to you could literally type in the name of the plugin and it wouldn't find it. Mm-hmm. But the meta behind those is getting better. It still uses Craft Search, which has its awesomeness and kind of heavy drawbacks there, but they have organized it a lot more now, and like you can look at the assets tab, and they literally have qualified a lot of stuff in there, which is where I found a lot of these. But the free ones, they're low impact. They're not adding a lot. Half of them don't even have like admin, utilities, so they're not like crowding up the sidebar or anything like that. But I think they're all like really useful, especially like the Unsplash and all of that stuff. You're using that within, like you would already do that, but if you can have a plugin that helps you and maybe has a log file if it fucks up or something, I think that the benefit of having a pretty high stack in your composer file of stuff that has to get updated or managed, that outweigh the drawbacks there outweigh the benefits of what you're getting in place. Take that with a grain of salt, because we're already probably all in the gray area now of like I've got probably 40 sites that I can't move up to Craft 4 because they have 2 plugins out of like 15 that just aren't ready yet. Now the good part is I've gotten great responses from every single person on a GitHub issue. Are you working on a Craft 4? Yes, I am. And actually this week, 2 of the ones, like I use a Nupal backup to run automated database and asset backups. And I work with Span Studios out of Chicago, and they have a lot of brochureware sites. We run that on every site, every single one of them. And part of my job with them is quarterly maintenance, where we really try to keep up to pretty much the closest like 3.6, 3.7 version. And I was like, dude, we're at the top. That's literally the only thing that's holding me back on this. And I think it might have been yesterday or the day before, the dudes hit me up on Discord and was like, hey, I'm about to publish the Craft 4 version. And I was like, yes, oh my God, I finally could move all of these sites up. They're all relatively simple, not doing anything crazy. And you probably learned a lot from the last, Craft 4 update one. But I think all of those that I've talked about, maybe except for one of them, is available in Craft 4 already. So I think anybody that has not abandoned a plugin is pretty much either 90% of the way there for Craft 4 or has already published something in there.
We're still waiting on Link It.
Link It, yeah. That's a big one. Like, I know he's working on it, but like, I think he wants to like rebuild some stuff in it. And I'm like, dude, just migrate it right now, rebuild it in 4.1 or something, you know?
Also got a site picker bug from like 2019. That's not.
There's another one that my colleague Ebar's found with Super Table, and that Genpack site that I showed all of the transforms. We're in a heavy rebuild right now. The client came to us a couple weeks ago and was like, "Hey, we accidentally told the CEO that it would launch a month earlier than what we agreed to." We were like, "Oh crap, that's Soul Space." So we've like onboarded like 10 developers in it, working hard as hell, and I was like, we probably should just go ahead and start with Craft 4 on it. So we moved it up. Ivar started working on the schema. He's got a really unique way of like managing it. And he's like, well, crap, I actually found a bug in the Craft 4 super table. So we had to downgrade back down to 3 while they're working on that. It happens, you know, like, again, super tables free, like, you know, like it's, you know, that kind of stuff happens. But yeah, that's going back to like last month's talk, like test stuff extensively before you're moving between major versions of things. All right, upcoming meetups. So we're heading down to Mode on Monday, June 13th, and we're going to talk about forms. And I'm going to have Kelsey, who's the product manager of Freeform. He's going to come on as a remote panelist, talk about the history, where it's going, why they think Freeform's awesome. And then we'll also have Formy Guy come on and he'll do his elevator pitch as well. He is actually in Melbourne, so it's going to be like 8:30 in the morning for him, 6:30 at night here. But it should be a pretty cool talk. We'll also talk about rolling your own forms, using like contact form for free and some of the plugins that add on to the functionality of that, hosting Pardot fucking forms, which I hate, and you know why they work and why they kind of suck. Should be a great talk. Mode is a really cool office, and it's within like a 2-minute walk from the east-west light rail station, and then if enough people come, maybe we can go to the sushi bar next door after the talk. They are just starting to get into craft over there. Chris has, I think, hired a freelancer to come on and try to start getting them on board with that. Yeah, so I think that's awesome. That's another agency that we can add to the craft global community here in Charlotte. I think it's powerful. Then we're going over to Crafted July 18th, and we're going to talk about hosting solutions. And we're going to have Nevin, who is the owner and operator of Architect. He's going to come on as a remote panelist. And then we're going to have a guy from Serve come on, and it's going to be late at night. So he said, don't be mad if I've got a couple pints in me at that point. And I'm like, dude, that's totally fine. You're volunteering to come on at 11:30 at night your time. You know, they'll talk about why their offerings are unique, you know, what makes them special, and what you kind of have to look out for craft hosting. I'll go over some other options, whether it's S3 or Fort Rabbit, or why you need to convince your client to move away from GoDaddy, which sucks. And, you know, the stuff that you need to have in place to make a craft site work properly. Always, you know, look at our meetup group. I'm trying to schedule these out at least 3 months at a time. We've got some pretty awesome special guests coming through the rest of the year, and possibly a big special guest if I can work out his flight to get here. He's a busy guy. I'm not going to say who it is, but you probably know who I'm talking about. And we're probably going to have a nice end of year party, which I'll cater with some barbecue. Live stream recording should work. I tested it last night and tested it here as I started, and nobody came on the chat to tell me that the audio wasn't working 40 minutes in like last week. So woohoo! Endorse me on LinkedIn for homemade AV equipment with my like 25-year-old tripod over there.
URL be on the meetup.
Yep. I put a bit.ly link just because the damn YouTube channel link is like that long. But yeah, hold on, I'll go back to it so you can see so it's just CLT Craft Dev. I put it in all the invites, and then on the actual meetup group, there's a link for it in there. So I may go back and re-record a couple of the old ones. They're really getting out of date, but I think the one about the schema will be awesome if I don't get that talk approved for .all. Again, thanks to Soul Space for providing money for our wonderful dinner, which I'm going to go eat some here in a little bit. And thank you to the staff and crew here at Union for continuing to offer their space and staying over late to host us here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.